in, but all right. So we're broadcasting right now. So
Oh, okay.
anybody who's looking at the title right now, they see that the title is really South African land redistribution. All right. My name is Antoine. I'm in Canada. I'm an African American. I'm lay. I'm lay on the topic. I don't purport to be an expert in South African politics at all, but I do stay informed as far as read a lot of papers, watch a lot of YouTube, and that means I have an opinion, and we're going to talk about that opinion. I have a special guest on the line. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is David Anderson. I'm currently in Louisiana, West Louisiana, Fort Polk. I'm in the U.S. Army, captain. I'm also a family medicine physician. And I think this is a very interesting topic, and it deserves the conversation and some attention just to speak on what it means and what the potential outcome would be and what's the best course of action, I think, for South Africa to take. Um, I think that's it.
All right. All right. So we'll go ahead. We'll get the conversation started. We have two other guests that are going to be dialing in over the time of the call. Also, we'll try to limit the time to roughly 30 minutes. It's 8:35 right now. So at 9:05, wherever we're at in this conversation, we'll go ahead and we'll stop. All right. I think by that time, everybody should have at least gotten their initial feelings out on the topic. So let me start. Um, I believe right now there's some hearings in South Africa in regards to land and it being redistributed, or exactly not even really redistributed, more so taken back by the government, um, which in my mind is always going to be something that you're talking about communalism or communism whenever you have the government controlling land, but they have their own reasons for doing so. I can't say I have a strong opinion one way or the other because part of me, just like every other black person in the diaspora, every other black person in the world, wants some place in the world where black people are not only in control, but also have wealth that they can share with everybody else in the black world, right? So we know that Africa was colonialized throughout the latter part of the 19th century and the early 20th century, and that most of the wealth was extracted from Africa and was used to finance, the growth of Europe. So I'm not an apologist for the apartheid government. I'm not trying to make any excuses for them. I'm more so looking at it from an angle of how do we, and I say we because I look at myself as an African in the diaspora. Uh, how do we, as Black people, um, go about a process in which we build a nation that is building wealth or allowing its citizens to build wealth? And it's not going to be, I don't think, through communism. It's not going to be by, a large scale land grab by the government in any country, because we saw the way that went in South Africa. Dave, I'll let you go ahead and talk for a moment. I'm going to try to bring Jeremy in here.
Okay. Yeah, I think the intentions behind this sort of land grab, they're valid. It's I think it's a way or an attempt to try and reverse or undo apartheid, um, which is understandable. I know back in I want to say the mid 1990s, the ANC was in power, and their goal was to try and transfer 30% of the land to blacks in an attempt again to kind of undo the apartheid, the remnants of apartheid. And unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. Only 10% of the land was transferred, 10% of that 30% goal, and those who actually took on the land, unfortunately, weren't trained to deal with the farmland. So it resulted in a massive loss of money for the country. So again, I think it is a socialist ideology, or you can even say
Just
it's a
send me your
communist
email.
ideology. But I think the intent behind it is understandable. Um, I do think that there needs to be some sort of restitution and redistribution, just given the history within South Africa and how the land was taken from um, the 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 residents of the land from due to colonization. So I do think we need that to occur, but I'm not 100% sure that this sort of land grab is the way to go. And we have examples of attempted land grab in Africa. I think it was Mugabe in Zimbabwe did a
Yes.
similar thing, took the land, tried to transfer it to blacks, and there were like 4,500 white landowners, and it dropped down to 300. And unfortunately, the individuals who inherited the land again did not know how to manage the land, and it ultimately resulted in a drop in production of tea and coffee and things of that nature, and their economy took a big hit. So again, I think the motives or the intent or the reasoning behind it may be justified, but I'm not 100% sure that this land grab approach is the best one to take. Kind of my thoughts on it.
All right. Hey, Jeremy, welcome to the chat. I gave my thesis. Dave gave his thesis. If you want to go ahead and give your thesis on the talk.
My thesis is simple. I'm glad they're doing it. That's my thesis.
All right. All right. Hey, could you talk a little bit more in detail about that?
All right, it's kind of choppy for me. I can't really make out everything that's being said on here.
Yeah. You could. I was saying you could. So I'm understanding that you're saying that you agree with it. I'll just restate mine. I agree that there's something that needs to be done to redistribute the wealth to the people who need it. I'm not going to say to all South Africans. Whenever you have a large scale, whenever you take money and you give it to, let's say, a government, that government tends to either hold that money or give the money to the people that it wants to give it to, right? It's not the friends of the government, right? It's not necessarily going to give it, it's not going to benefit the end users, it's not going to benefit the people. The system that they have right now is not benefiting the people. It was like Dave stated. They were given a time limit where they had to redistribute a certain amount of the land, and they did not comply. I don't think they ever would have complied. I don't think they ever would have shared the same knowledge, all the knowledge that they have on how to take care of the land. They wouldn't have redistributed that. And at the end of the day, in reality, I wouldn't even say, hey, give us the land. I want them to give us the knowledge, give the end people the knowledge and the tools that they need to work the land. Because you can give them the land. They did that. And in a lot of cases, what the end user would do is they would actually sell the land back to a white farmer and make some money. And more, if they're anything like short-sighted African Americans that we might hear of sometimes, they probably took that money and they bought some Jordans and maybe a house and a new car, a couple of jackets, winter coats, and then that was it. And we were stuck in the same situation where you have 10% of the population owning 80% of the land. And believe me, South Africa is not the only African nation in that predicament. All right. But Antoine, do me a favor and mute. I have my son on the line also. He's listening in. One, you're sitting sideways, son, so flip your camera so we can see you laterally. All right, and then put your phone on mute so I don't get a reverb throughout the house, okay? You're awesome. So I don't want to run on and on. And the other thing, Jeremy and Antoine, both of you guys just chimed in. So the talk is going to end at 9:05 just for the sake of time. So I don't want to monopolize the mic too long. I'll try to talk in like short 2-minute segments. And I'm hoping everybody will keep their talk short enough where everybody's able to participate. Go ahead, state your thesis, Antoine. We're talking about South African land redistribution. All right, that was it. Drop the mic. Jeremy,
I kind of like that idea of handing these individuals the tools necessary to farm the land and to be successful with the land, cultivate the land. I think that's big. Now, the amendment that they're trying to make to this 25th article of their Constitution is not only just this land grab, but land grab partner with unfair compensation or no compensation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big issue as well. So maybe if they were to fairly compensate the individuals, just like we do here in the United States, you know, our government can do something similar. If they see a piece of land that they want, they can take that piece of land, but they must fairly compensate us. If they can take that same concept and apply it to the amendment that they're making to the article, I think that would be good. And then also ensure that they give the individuals who receive the land the appropriate skills to farm the land, cultivate the land, and to generate money. Because, you know, it's if they take the land and give it to these individuals and they don't have the skills to deal with the land, it's gonna hurt their own economy. So those are probably some some additions that I would make that I would suggest they make to the amendment to kind of help the process to be better.
Right. So, and then it's, you know, I'm telling you, there's two ways the EFF, the economic freedom fighters can go, and they can either go the way of they'll be revolutionaries, right? But if it goes south, what people will realize is they were radical and they were communists. Yeah. Now, communists, I'm not going to say communism doesn't work. It hasn't worked in most cases. Some cases, it worked for a short term. But the problem, you know, Julius Malema, I've heard him talk on several occasions, seems to be a very charismatic character, but he's no economist. He's not an economist. He has an idea of what he wants to get done, and he's able to speak and people listen because he's saying what people want to hear. But I don't know if he's actually laying out the dangers of or the risks that they're going to run by one, expelling pretty much their food source, and then also South Africa is an engine for the whole Southern Africa, and if it falls, it's going to be dominoes. It's like a domino toppling. It's going to be a cascading effect. It's going to hurt a lot of the other countries in Africa. And all of the diaspora, all the Africans that are in South Africa from like Nigeria or whatever else, that may be sending remittances back to their homes. And already we know that South Africa is going through their economy right now. There's videos even 5 days ago showing that their economy is contracting. Right. Not to mention, a lot of people are saying this whole land redistribution is really it's a distractor. It's not even saying it's something that's like in the top 10 of South Africa's issues. What are some of the issues? We know just 4 or 5 months ago, we were talking about Cape Town, and we were talking about a water shortage there, right? And the water shortage isn't because of drought. The water shortage is because they don't have the right people managing the utilities, right? You also have a crime epidemic on a scale of nothing seen here in the U.S. Chicago pales in comparison to the crime and the murder rate of Johannesburg. I want to say something like 56 people a day are being murdered in South Africa. Okay, so you take all of that, and then you add to the fact that we're talking about possibly putting South Africa in the same position that Zimbabwe is in right now, and we're talking about a terrible situation happening. Right, this isn't the rainbow nation that Mandela wanted. Right, so it's like we have to work hand in hand with all, well, not we, but all South Africans, Black, white, Asian, have to work together, and all South Africans have a stake. And all South Africans have a responsibility to make sure that the least represented in their population, or the most vulnerable in their population, see some benefit from any type of large-scale economic change.
Yeah. See, the only thing is, like, the current socioeconomic structure that they have in place is predicated on continued oppression of the Black population within South Africa. So you kind of brought up the crime situation. I think a lot of that has to do with the deep-rooted poverty that exists within the Black population of South Africa. Because as we know, poverty breeds crime. So when you talk about, restitution and redistribution of land and giving these impoverished people an opportunity to excel from an economic standpoint, I mean, the idea of that is attractive. But to me, the question is, how do we go about doing it carefully?
Hey, Adam, can you hear him? I don't hear anybody now. Hold on 1 second. Let me turn this shit off.
Can you hear me now?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I hear you now. I was in my headphones. Okay. My bad. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying, just given the socioeconomic structure that they have in place right now, it seems to be predicated on the continued oppression of the Black population within South Africa. And when you talk about restitution and redistribution of land, giving these impoverished people an opportunity to excel from an economic standpoint, I think that's very attractive. To me, the question is, how do they go about doing it to prevent economic hardship or loss for the country? And I think that if they provided the people who inherit the land the appropriate skills to manage the land, that would help to prevent economic loss. So I think there's a way that they can do this and be successful in doing it.
Yeah. Jeremy, you're awful quiet.
Yeah, I can hear you. It's really choppy on my side, so I'm not catching every word of this. I'm trying to get the main points.
Okay. Well, I'm careful, again, whenever I correlate crime and poverty, because there's plenty of, what I will say is ignorance is normally more directly correlated with crime. Okay, and ignorance is not it doesn't necessarily mean that you know, it's not stupidity. Ignorance is just being, you know, maybe ignorant of the better way to do something, or only seeing one way out of a situation. Only way I see right now, okay, maybe I just take what I need. And that happens when you put that wealth disparity um, next, you know, when you introduce the wealth disparity, we have somebody very rich next to somebody very poor, and they have that gap, and they say, okay, how do I close this gap? Now, if everybody around you is poor, then you're not going to rob other poor people as readily. You don't have to kill other poor people, right? But when you see the wealth gap and you're looking for a way to get what that other person has, and maybe then you start talking about crime. And that's why I think I'll go back to what David was saying. That is a difference between South Africa and maybe some West African nations. Is that South Africa is a very wealthy nation. It's basically a European nation, right? So you have to give the Europeans their props in that. And I'm not going to give them too much props. I'll just give them props and say they built a nation there. Okay. Now you have China. China is in Africa heavy right now. And China is also a member of the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I want to say South Africa was a late entrant, right? It's the last company that came into that group. And what it is a group of developing countries that are pretty much, you know, signing trade agreements, and they're working together to become first world countries. Now, China is in Africa heavy. You know? So as we're talking about South Africa and the land redistribution and the possible dangers there, everybody should know also there's about 90% good news coming out of Africa right now. You have Ethiopia growing, their GDP growing at a double-digit intervals year over year over the past 12 years. You have Rwanda, who's also doing the same. You have countries like Tanzania and Kenya who are building roads. Uganda, China, again, is in all of these countries and more countries in Africa building infrastructure. And if you have the time, go on YouTube, look at, I believe it's CGTN, and just type in China and Africa. And especially over the last week or so, they're doing like a 5-part series where they're just talking about all these half-an-hour shows where they're just talking about infrastructure that's being built right now in all these different countries through China. But what China is doing that the Europeans didn't do, and I'll try to say this and hurry up and get off the mic. What they're doing that the Europeans did not do is they're actually going in, still they're looking for their own self-interest, but they're actually going in and they're transferring knowledge. And that's where the Europeans missed out. And it may have been racialism, where they felt as if the Africans were not able to be educated on that level, but they missed out on a huge opportunity, on a big opportunity. And now the Chinese are closing that gap, and Africa is realigning itself to be better connected with China, and is losing that connection that was rooted in colonialism that it had with Europe. Jeremy, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Did you get any of that?
I caught that. I don't like any of it, to be honest. Like I really don't. Like I don't like any of it. I can't give Europe props for what's been happening in Africa, because I feel like it's been a nothing but a poison to that continent, whether we're talking West Africa or South Africa. I feel like everything that has been done as a result from that European influence in Africa has been leading to the devastation that it's been in for centuries. I can't see any good in that. I mean, look at where they're at. You've got Africans literally, bleaching their skin, pregnant women bleaching their skin while they're pregnant so that they can give birth to lighter babies because they don't want to have black children, like dark brown. They don't want to have that. So I feel like there's a lot of brainwashing, and I'm actually happy that a lot of that education or so-called education wasn't pushed, because you see what happens out here in America. I mean, we're talking about South Africa, and that's fine, but I don't know. I think for me, we've got a lot of battles here that we're not even addressing, and I think we need to be able to focus on, because a lot of the things that's happening and this is why I say that I'm for what's happening in South Africa right now. It's no secret that a lot of black people were in this country pre-Columbus era. So long before 1492, there were black people in this country, on this continent, this landmass. And, to erase that history and rebuild a new history where we're being educated by the very people that have been longing for our destruction, and we allow those same people to educate us, that's to our detriment.
Okay, all right. Let's keep it on the continent, and let's try to focus. Let's try to focus on South Africa. And we'll bring it back to African Americans in the other chat.
Okay, fair
But
enough.
you hit on skin bleaching. I think Malema had a really good point when he was talking about the Kenyans and how the Kenyans and the judicial system still wear the British wigs, right?
Yeah, I heard him talking about that too. Yes.
Yeah, he said, do they think so? I mean, he's charismatic, man. I mean, a lot of that stuff is true, but when you get down to the ones and zeros, that's not going to ensure that when the government takes this land, they're not going to give it to their best friends, and that's not going to ensure that the people who they give the land to are going to be able to. I'm not going to say know how to work the land. That they're going to be able to work the land as efficiently as it's being worked right now, where they have a food surplus instead of a food shortage. So a lot of times, we'll get into our feelings or our emotions, and because we have the numbers, we have what they call it a populism. We'll take those votes. We'll do whatever we want to do, and then we'll end up paying the price later. When Idi Amin decided to kick all the Asians out of Uganda, I'm pretty sure he had the popular vote. A lot of people thought that would be a great thing to do, but then it didn't work out that way. So it's all about intention. It's all about results, not what people intended from the results. So I'm hoping that they can meter their anger, and maybe just think about a smarter way to go about this. There's a way, and two, the white South African farmer who's worked the land for all of his life should be compensated with something. We can't say because he had something. So even if your grandfather stole it, if it's yours,
but it's not his if it was stolen.
It might have been stolen, but today, two wrongs don't make a right. So we're saying that, hey, we're going to steal this back because shit we can,
But it's not stealing it back if it was rightfully yours. Like, you can't, if somebody goes and takes a pencil from you and they steal that pencil from you and you take it back, you're not stealing it back because it was already yours ours to begin with.
If you take it back. Exactly. So if you take it back, i.e., when you took the land from the Zulus, the Zulus took it back, all those Zulus who were there are dead. And so is the person that took it. So now we're dealing with, I can't be penalized for my father's sin. You see what I'm saying? I mean, but that's a separate argument. I'll say, as you, my primary concern is going to be with the Black South Africans who aren't reaping any benefit right now from the land. How do we get them the skill set that they need? Before you even give them land, let's put some food in their belly. Let's make sure they have the knowledge in their head. And then we can start talking about transferring some of those land deeds back to Black South Africa. But this full scale just rush to take the government to take the land is going to be painful. And it's going to be it's going to be upstairs all hell. I think the best thing for them to do is to scale it back, maybe take a small amount of land, but not do that without first. The government needs to make sure people are fed. The government needs to make sure people are skilled. However, don't get the land before you get the skills to these people.
But I think that's like one of the things that, and I know you talk about America. You know, I feel like the government having that much involvement in the day-to-day lives of its citizens, that's not something, like, that's why there is the Republican Party. You know, they fight for small government. You don't want your government in charge of whether or not you eat. You don't want your government in charge of all of the different facets of life. You know, because if you do that now, you're giving the government too much power, and they've got too much control over your well-being, your family's well-being. You don't want the government to have that much influence over everything.
I agree.
Then it's better than the current system. Like right now in Africa, you can't even travel to the different African states without needing different visas. Like I think, and that's because of this government involvement. I think that the government should back off. You know, and even out here, I feel like the government should back off in a sense. If you give the government too much power, then they have too much control.
Okay, so I agree with that point to an extent. When you're talking about America, so you have to realize each one of these countries are different countries. Maybe not so much in Africa. A lot of these countries should all be, because, you know, they were divided for a completely different reason. Us first world Americans, they have attained this level of industrialization, and now we have this market or this economy where we're a knowledge economy, and now, you know, we have wealth, and we have you know, we just have a completely different way of life than a person living in rural Africa right now, right? So their government is going to be modeled completely different, where democracy for them may look like their government. It might be a little bit more socialist than we would be comfortable here in America. And it might take that for them to get off the ground, right? So in the beginning,
because you got to think, when our Constitution first started, we weren't where we are now. When the U.S. Constitution was first drafted, we were in a similar situation in this country as compared to where they are now.
I don't think we were, because I hate to say this, you just had two different knowledge levels. So you had, America was built by colonizers.
No.
America was
built by the hundreds of years of free labor.
America, politically, when I'm talking about I'm not talking about the actual physical labor. I hate to, I'm not discrediting. I understand where you're coming from. Yes, African slaves, Indian slaves did actually do the physical labor in the southern part of America, in a lot of parts of the northern America also. You're talking about the construction of of the political system, that goes back to England. That goes back to the Magna Carta. That's where they got that information from. They didn't get it from the Indians. A lot of people say, oh, they got this and that from the Indians. Not really. Like those ideas they had back in Europe, and they exported those ideas to Australia. They exported those ideas to South Africa. They exported those ideas to America for themselves. They weren't even considering us at the time. All right. So what I'm saying is, Black people and white people, when it comes to democracy, we have different cultures, and your culture is going to dictate what type of politics are going to work best for you. Like if you know, I can think of several like African revolutionaries, man, that were pretty much like you had Sankara in Burkina Faso, right? I think Sankara, but he had, he was trying to affect the person that was downtrodden. He was trying to affect the minds of the peasants. So he had a more socialist type of setup, a more socialist type of mind frame, and it would have worked had he not been assassinated, right? But that would call for the government actually being involved in the lives of the peasants, where they need to be involved. And I think the peasants actually, when you're dealing with people who want to be affected like immediately, right? A lot of the cause of the turmoil in South Africa right now is because people don't see change quick enough. They want the land transfer, but the land transfer didn't come fast enough. So now people come and say, hey, I'm going to do this right now. And people get excited about that, right? So that's the type of government I would almost say that's what they want, because they want the quickest result. And if you want the quickest result, what do you need? You don't even need a socialist government. You almost just need a dictator. If you look at one of the countries that is doing the best in Africa right now, it's Rwanda. But then another complaint that people have about Rwanda, as well as it's doing, is the fact that Kagame, or what's his name? Kagame, who's been in power, I want to say for the last, he's been in power for a long time. I don't want to misspeak, but he's been in power for a really long time. But they look at him as kind of being a strong man, but he's a good strong man. You see what I'm saying? We got David back.
Yeah, I'm back on my battery had died.
So go ahead, Dave.
What's the topic of discussion now?
Yeah, flip. And you know what? We're at 9:12 right now. I don't know what you guys want to talk a little bit longer. You guys want to flip this one?
Say it again.
Did you want to talk a little bit longer, or did you guys want to flip this conversation and do a different one?
I think we've of course I missed out on like the past 5 or 10 minutes, but I think we hit the topic pretty hard.
All right.
I think we kind of voiced some of our concerns with the amendment that South Africa made, the pros and cons of it, and, the potential outcome.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we've exhausted it. Adam, did you have any last words?
No, I don't really have any parting words on this. I feel pretty good. I feel good.
All right, respect everybody. And I hope I didn't talk anybody down or anything like that. I know I have a tendency to talk at length about this. I'm kind of passionate about. I'm passionate about my people, wherever it may be. All right.
You know what? I feel like I would much rather have passion about subjects like this than what some celebrity is doing on reality TV. This is perfect for me. I love it.
That's it. All right, fellas, hold the line 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast at this point.
Okay.